In the quiet corners of a small town, Maribelle, a spirited and ordinary girl, finds herself embroiled in a heated confrontation with a dashing knight named Austin to protect her brother. Little does Maribelle know, this tense encounter is just the first thread of a tangled web of secrets and intrigue waiting to reshape her life, and perhaps her destiny. And so, our story begins with a charming young prince walking into a room with a beautiful young girl waiting for him in bed. To him, that girl is Ilse, but little does he know. That night is supposed to be the night they consummate their marriage, with a witness sitting there according to the kingdom's custom to ensure a successful marriage. In the end, she ended up losing her virginity to a man she was not married to, let alone in love with. Although she's unwilling and scared, she knows that if she doesn't do this, there'd be no telling of what will happen to her or her brother. The 2-year war between the Kingdom of Gadril and the Kingdom of Mercens ended with the Kingdom of Gadril's victory. The defeated Kingdom of Mercens was forced to hand over its princess, Ilse, to the Gadril crown prince, Andrea, in marriage. This so-called payment was part of a leave treaty with no territorial transfer. The Kingdom of Gadril was reluctant to accept this deal, but to avoid being taken over by the Rhineland Empire, they had no choice. The real name of the young girl at the palace currently is Maribelle. As a commoner living in a small village, she never thought she would be chosen to replace Princess Ilse. Just 3 months ago, she was living a quiet life in the village, and to be honest, she couldn't care less about who would become the crown princess. She's from a family of 4 and Colin, her brother is 7 years younger than her. Colin is a kind boy who always greets her with a smile, whereas, when she was young, her father would tell her that she was not his daughter and her mother never protected her against him. When Colin was born, things got worse for her. She had to drop out of school due to lack of money and started working in a diner when she was 16. Her brother was the only thing that made her happy. One fateful day, she saw a carriage in front of their house and wondered why it was there. She quickly rushed home only to find Colin and her parents on the ground, bowing to a man who came to report that her little brother jumped out in front of his carriage. The man explained that his horse was startled and injured itself by kicking the carriage with its hind legs, so it's only natural the boy pays for the damage. Surprised, Maribelle asked him how much the pay would cost and he said 10 gold coins. He also added that if the little boy worked for him for 5 years, he should be able to repay him. After hearing the outrageous amount, she protested that the man didn't appear injured and the carriage she saw outside wasn't damaged either, so there was no reason to charge that amount. Before she could even finish speaking, her father grabbed her and quickly apologized to the man, explaining that Colin was his only heir and needed around the house. However, he mentioned that if the man insisted on payment, he should take Maribelle instead of Colin. Hearing this, her mother tried to talk to her dad, but he shut her up with a thunderous slap and asked the man if he would accept the offer of his daughter. Despite Colin's plea, the young man accepted the offer and immediately grabbed her while she struggled. Again, her father slapped her and reminded her that she had to protect her brother. Colin cried so much and tried to go after his sister as the man took her away, but he kicked him and slammed him to the ground, successfully separating the siblings. After the whole incident at her house, she was forced into the carriage. She tried to escape but was caught and even slapped in the process. Finally, they arrived at his home and Maribelle was well taken care of, but all the while, she kept on wondering if she was to be Austin's plaything. After her shower, the maid informed her that she was about to meet a member of the royal family, so she shouldn't look up until she's told to do so. When she arrived, the royal lady in question asked to see her face, and as soon as she lifted her head, she noticed the uncanny resemblance between the both of them. The royal lady was introduced as Princess Ilse d'Olorence, the first princess of the Kingdom of Mercens. The princess also expressed her shock at their resemblance and smacked her for looking in her eyes, after which she asked for her name and age. After she introduced herself as Maribelle Newman, aged 20 years old, the same age as the princess revealed that henceforth she would be her handmaid. Maribelle was confused because she didn't know the etiquette and she never attended school, but they assured her she would receive training so she wouldn't be rude to Princess Ilse's groom. As soon as she heard the word groom, She immediately recalled the villagers talking about it once, and then she was forced to ask if she was to enter the Gadril kingdom's royal castle, and the princess affirmed. Furthermore, she ripped her dress and poked her cleavage, commenting that Maribelle's reaction to her touches is proof that the goods aren't damaged. The princess went on to explain that she's had her eyes on the poor girl for a while, and in the course of that, she noticed that no matter how many times men at the diner asked her to escort them at night, she never accepted their offers, and that was exactly the kind of chastity she was looking for. With a firm gaze, she reiterated that Maribelle would become her handmaid and she needed her to take her place and get intimate with Prince Andrea. She explained that they would want to make sure that the bed sheets are stained with blood, and if it's revealed that the prince married an unchaste princess, the peace within the kingdom of Gadril would fall apart. Panicking, Maribelle protested that the truth would surely come out, and also, having her sleep with a total stranger and being the princess's scapegoat was not something she wanted. Before she could even finish speaking, Austin smacked her face, but the princess stopped him and mentioned that Maribelle's brother disrespected her bodyguard Austin Erickson. So, if she didn't obey, she would have her little brother assassinated. Her mind raced after hearing the threat on her brother's life, so she asked if she would be set free if she obeyed, and the wedding night went well. Then, the princess replied by pointing out that it would be suspicious if one of her handmaids suddenly disappeared, so Maribelle would have to serve her for half a year before she released her. With no choice left, she agreed to do it for the sake of her little brother, Colin, but a thought lingered in her mind: how could she possibly deceive someone known as the Fierce Lion? Could I ever pass as a princess? She asked, but the princess said that it all depends on her training. She also revealed that they had 3 months until the wedding ceremony, but until then, in addition to the handmaid training, Maribelle would take her place in learning to become a queen. The day after that, Maribelle's exhaustive training began. 2 months passed and the princess summoned her again to test her knowledge so far. She began asking her several questions about the royal family and the castle, which she answered correctly. So, Princess Ilse shared that it was time for the final preparation, which was learning how to behave like her. How to use cutlery, hold a pen, and handle a fan. Curiously, Maribelle asked if this meant mimicking the princess's every action, and she affirmed. The princess then revealed that in a few days, she would come to the royal castle to serve as her handmaid, and she would be posing as Austin's distant relative, which meant that she would need to remember the Erickson lineage as well. However, they must give a disguise because people would grow suspicious since she looks so much like the princess. So, they came up with the idea of wearing makeup and glasses, which Maribelle would have to learn to apply on her own. After that, Princess Ilse decided to change her name to something not too different from her real name to avoid any confusion, so she renamed her Marie. A few days later, Marie arrived in the kingdom of Mercens' royal castle fully disguised. With her current look, no one would be able to uncover her disguise. She arrived and was introduced to a lady named Kate Brown. Austin explained that Kate was the first handmaid to the princess and knew about the whole disguise thing. Then, he introduced her to another guard knight named Harris and explained that the 4 of them would escort Princess Ilse to her wedding. Curiously, Marie asked if he would be accompanying her as well, and he responded by saying that the guard knights were there to protect the royal family with their lives and a wedding was not going to part them from her. Furthermore, he instructed that she must learn the handmaid's tasks from Kate and memorize Princess Ilse's behaviors. For a month afterward, she learned her work as a handmaid and learned everything she could about the princess's wording and manners by her side. One day, Marie witnessed the princess going to see her father and also how brief the meeting was, so she concluded that the princess might be quite lonely. Her training continued and she gradually began mimicking the princess, although she was very anxious about the princess marrying into the enemy's kingdom. Kate pleaded that she supported the princess even though she didn't necessarily sign up for the job. On the day of the wedding, they all sat quietly in the carriage as they crossed the border into the kingdom of Gadril, and it hit Marie that there's no turning back. They finally arrived and got out of the carriage, and Prince Andrea immediately welcomed the princess. On one hand, Marie was so stunned by the beauty of the prince, she couldn't believe how beautiful he was until now. The ceremony began and the couple took their vows, but all the while, Marie's mind wandered. There were so few guests for the wedding of 2 royal members, the king, queen, and the 4 of them who escorted the princess. She imagined that wedding ceremonies would look different, full of laughter and guests congratulating the couple, but no. This case was different. They were just 2 chess pieces from both kingdoms. After the marriage was concluded, the crowd cheered the couple while Marie secretly admired Prince Andrea. Considering his nickname the Fierce Lion, she thought he would be more hard-faced, but I guess she was wrong. Much later, Prince Andrea ushered his new bride in and offered her something to eat while he retired to his room. His aide, Edwin, commented on the princess being beautiful at least, but the prince cautioned him, saying he didn't want to hear things like that from him too. He had never been interested in getting married his entire life, so why did he have to be involved in a strategic marriage to deceive the public? He asked Edwin. But Edwin laid out his strategy behind the marriage, and this only reminded him of his friend Herman he lost in the war against Mercens. Herman's injury was caused by a poisoned arrow that only the deity clan has, which means that someone from Mercens was allying with the deity clan. His marriage to a princess from such an enemy kingdom was quite ridiculous. Besides, he saw her eyes when she said the vows. She has no affection for him, and it looked more like she hated him, which was understandable considering the circumstances surrounding their marriage. Prince Andrea read a few details about his new bride from Edwin's research, but the aide reminded him that he had a new wife, which was a direction to the era of peace. Prince Andrea interjected and said that if the relationship between the 2 kingdoms worsened, they may let go of the princess completely, but then, would it really matter if he pretended to be friendly with her? To his surprise, Edwin suggested that if he had an heir that drew from both bloodlines, he could make him the king of Mercens and make it into their puppet state. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, the princess was being directed to her room and had just been informed that they'd prepared a room for her and the prince. After the guard informed Austen that the knight's room is downstairs, he protested and said that he couldn't protect the princess from downstairs, but the other guard assured him that the princess wouldn't need protection in the palace. After which he informed them about their meal and slammed the door behind him. Seeing his demeanor, the princess engaged in a brief conversation with Kate while Marie stood there reflecting on what they said. While the princess sat to take a rest, Kate reminded Marie to start getting ready for the night. On the other hand, Prince Andrea and Edwin were conversing about the prince's first night with his wife. Edwin reminded him that his behavior that night was very important to make a complacent wife into a submissive one, and then he wished him luck. At the same time, Marie was also thinking about that night, wondering how the prince was going to treat her. Much later, the palace maids brought some food for the princess and her handmaids. As they ate, Marie couldn't stop thinking about her night with the prince. She thought she was prepared, but she was still very much scared. It was time to take a shower and prepare for the prince, so Princess Ilse ordered Kate to make sure that she and Marie looked identical while preparing them both. So, Kate began the makeup, nail trimming, and hair grooming, and after she was done, Marie looked nothing different from the princess. Marie had concerns about the transparent nightwear she was wearing, but the princess comforted her. Then, she slid her hand across Marie's chest and mentioned that she liked how humiliated she was because it made it more believable that she was a virgin. With the way she looked in the nightwear, she would get Prince Andrea in the mood in no time. The princess advised her not to resist him, but let him have his way with her. After they were done preparing, Marie was ushered to the room to wait for Prince Andrea. She sat there lost in thought, observing the room where she would spend the night with a man she didn't love or marry. As she waited with thoughts swirling in her mind, the door creaked open and the prince walked in, asking if she waited for long, but she affirmed negatively. Then, she asked about the company he came with, but he explained that the man was there as their witness. She tried to protest against the idea, but immediately remembered the princess's warning to not resist Prince Andrea. So, he scooped her and carried her to the bed while she was lost in thoughts. All the while, she couldn't help but notice how beautiful he was. Then, she asked again if he really needed to record that night's event, but he responded that it was the kingdom's custom to ensure a successful marriage. He even went as far as promising to help her clear her mind, and then, he began kissing her. He took off his shirt and requested to see her body, but she turned away. And so, he held up her hands, pulled down her dress and said that he wasn't interested in a princess from Mercens, but the sight before him wasn't bad at all. Feeling embarrassed, Marie looks away. Then, the prince reveals that he wasn't looking forward to the marriage at all and asks if it was the same for her but gets no response. He adds that it's been decided between their kingdoms, so they must still make the marriage official on the record. As he continues to initiate intimacy, he notices how tense she is. Meanwhile, her mind races as she wonders if he's realized that she's not the real princess. She tries to remain calm, but the further he goes, the more scared she gets. She feels like her body and soul are falling apart, especially with the witness seated by the corner. As Marie turns and realizes his presence, she quickly turns away and hides her face, shivering and crying. Yet, she still inwardly thinks of stopping her tears because she can't disrespect a prince as it's a crime. As she continues crying on the bed, she thinks about what Princess Ilse would say if she refuses the prince tonight. Also, if they find out that she's useless, she and Colin will both be assassinated. So, she decides to pull herself together before Prince Andrea becomes angry. The war between the two kingdoms is finally over and she no longer has to worry about Colin going to war, but if it is reported that she disrespected the prince, reverse might be the case. She screams in fear, startling the prince. After a moment, he opens the curtain and informs the witness that he's calling it off tonight. The man tries to insist, but Prince Andrea yells and asks if he thinks he can sleep with a woman in such a state. In a much calmer manner, he adds that he doesn't think the rule says you must consummate the marriage on the first night. Then, with his eyes narrowed, he orders the man out of the room. Now alone with his supposed new bride, he turns back to her and asks if it's better now, but Marie only blurts out an apology. He assures her that it's okay and promises not to do anything to her tonight. As he lays down back on the bed, he informs her that he can pat her back until she calms down if she likes, and she agrees. Then, he gestures for her to turn around and lie down beside him. When she does, he covers her in a blanket and begins patting her back. All the while, she takes note of how warm his hand is and how he's acting like a different person. Pulling her out of her thoughts, he urges her to get some sleep, then he turns away, backing her. Marie apologizes again about her behavior earlier, but he assures her that it's fine. Then he adds that she's not a prostitute after all, she's most definitely a princess. He mentions that he spent a lot of time on battlefields and had forgotten how to treat women, so he's taking the blame. Marie just stares at him as she thinks she's supposed to ask him to try again, but for now, she just wants to appreciate his kindness. Then, she thanks him again. As weird as this may sound, this is the first time since she was kidnapped that she's sleeping peacefully. A few moments later, the prince turns to her with a tender expression, caressing her face and remarking that she gives off a very different vibe from earlier in the day. As Marie drifts into sleep, she unknowingly calls her brother's name, and this comes as a shock to Prince Andrea as he realizes it's a man's name. The next morning, Marie stirs awake and the first thing she sees is Prince Andrea staring at her. Just as he's about to rise from the bed, she blushes and greets him. He responds and quickly grabs her hand, pulling her closer. "You're not used to men, are you?" he asks, rubbing her palm. "All I did was grab your wrist," he adds. While wearing his shirt, he mentions that he's not blaming her and he's actually looking forward to easing her into it. Furthermore, he leans in and promises not to force her into anything. With a stern gaze, he requests that she wait for him in the same room tonight as well. "Ease me in what?" Marie wonders as she stares at him from behind, but he coincidentally turns and catches her off guard and she quickly covers her face. Seeing this reaction, he holds her chin up and suggests they first get used to looking at each other in the eyes, otherwise, they won't be able to even have a conversation. As he takes gentle strides out of the room, the witness from earlier insists on going to check, so he slams the door and orders Marie to dress up. After she's done, the man enters and insists on taking a look at the bedsheet, and when he doesn't find anything, he assures her of his return tonight and leaves. As he steps out of the room, Prince Andrea draws him to a corner and asks him not to come back for a while. He shares that he decided not to do anything until Princess Ilse gets used to him. The man, still insisting, says that the union is tied to the allyship of their kingdoms and he must report to the kingdom of Mercens as well. He continues explaining and even says that the prince is trying to take away his duty. The prince roars as he takes his beast form and asks the man if he has to cater to his duty and force his inexperienced wife to sleep with him, but he responds negatively. I'll let you know when we're complete. If it's your duty to report, make something up to tell my father, Prince Andrea says as he walks away. Kate, who happens to be passing by, observes the exchange and notes that nothing happened last night. Now, she can't help but wonder what Princess Ilse will say to that.